Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you guys a program that is pretty much the reason why I got kicked off of a fantasy hockey website. And if you don't know what fantasy hockey is, then I'll explain it in like 2 seconds. It's pretty much a game that you can play on the computer, and you can actually bet money for it. A lot of people do. That's what I was doing. And what you do is whatever players are playing in a hockey game that night, you pick whatever players you're going to think are going to do the best, score the most goals. And whoever picks whatever players correctly and they do score the most goals, then they win the money. So what people usually do is they look at last year's stats for that player, but this can kind of be deceiving because some players score a lot of goals just because they played in a lot of games. It doesn't mean they're a real good player. In another example is sometimes a really good player gets injured, so maybe they didn't score a lot of goals that year, but you know that they're really good. So instead of just looking at the total amount of goals they scored, it's really good to see how many goals they scored per game. So I'll show you guys how to calculate that right now, and we're going to use something called parallel arrays. And if you guys don't really understand how fantasy hockey works or anything like that, it's going to be real simple to follow along. You guys are going to, I don't know, probably want to play by the end of this tutorial. So we're going to be creating a couple arrays and looping through them all at the same time. So let's go ahead and make a counter variable. And what we're going to do is we're going to make our first array of players. Now say that we only want to test 5 players right now, but usually this is like 500 or everyone in the entire NHL or whatever it is. So I'll just put the player's number right here. So there's a player with a jersey 60, or excuse me, 58, 66, 68, 71, and 87. Sidney Crosby. Awesome player, except Malkin is my favorite. But anyways, let's focus here, Bucky. Alright. So the next array I want to output is how many goals they scored in total that season. So again, 5, and in curly brackets I'll put, I don't know, something like 26, 39, 25, 29, and 31. So what this is basically saying is the player 58 scored 26 goals, 71 scored 29 goals, so on and so forth. So all of these arrays are related. So now we just need a couple more things now that we see how the arrays are related. So int games played, and set this equal to, and the values don't really matter here as long as you have 5 values in there. I'm going to set this equal to 30, 30, 28. We'll say that there's 30 games in a season. So a couple players played in all the games, and of course this player only played in 28, and this player, he got hurt, so he could only play in 26. So I actually need 3 more variables. Or one of the other ones I need is an array called PPG, and this is points per game. So again, this is how many goals they scored, but it doesn't tell you who's the best because we want to find out how many goals did they score per game. So for example, let's look at something. So this guy, he played in 30 games, but he scored 39 goals. So it's better than this guy who scored, or excuse me, played in 30 games, but he only scored 26 goals. So again, this guy would be better, and you guys are going to see real easy later on what I'm talking about. So the last thing that we need is a float, and this is going to store the best, pretty much the best player's points per game, and we'll just set this equal to 0.0 right now. And the last thing we need is int best player. So I know that those are a lot of variables in arrays, but it actually only takes like 3 or 4 lines of real code aside from the loop to figure everything out. So now I'm just going to create a basic for loop, and again, the idea of this for loop is to loop through all of these players one by one and calculate their points per game average. Very simple stuff. So for the counter variable, just put I equals 0 to start. Put I is less than 5. and I plus plus. So this is going to loop through 5 times, like I said, one for each player. So in order to calculate the points per game, see right now this is empty, and that actually should be a 5 in there. See right now this is a float array that can hold 5 different floats, and it's going to hold the points per game for each player. So we'll put PPG and I, and just like before when I showed you guys how to manually type stuff in, well, you can also do it algorithmically. So of course the points per game is goals of that player, and each player is I over the games played for that player. Now check this out real quick. The points per game is pretty much a statistic. In any statistic, we want to make sure to include the decimal point. It's a float. However, goals, of course, you can't score half a goal, and you can't play in half a game. Well, maybe you can if you get injured, but not in this case. So what we want to do is, since we're looking for a float right here, we need to typecast these ints into floats. So that's a case scenario where typecasting does come in handy. So even though these are ints on the right hand side, we want to treat them as floats, so that way whenever we do this arithmetic, we get our answer points per game in a float in a nice decimal. So the next thing I want to do is just print out something on the screen. So I'm going to loop through 5 times, and I'm pretty much going to print the player's stats on each row, so it looks like a real pretty looking table. So again, the first thing I'm going to print out is their number. So %D tab, I'll print out the number, the goals, the games played, and the points per game. So %D, actually I can do this. %D, 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 and the last one is the float. So that's why I want to do %F, and we'll just display to 2 decimal places. And remember, each player is on a new line, so kick it on a new line. And now you have to say, okay, well, this is the format. What exactly do you want me to print out? Well, the first one is just the player. So this is going to print out their jersey number. The second one, what did I want to do? I'll go ahead and print out their goals. How many goals they scored that season. The third one is games played. And the last one is what we just calculated, points per game. And this is pretty much the value that we're looking for. The player with the best points per game, as you know, is the one that we want. So right now, we can actually just do something like this. If we run this baby right now, and we get an error because why? And it is because this goal is supposed to be goals. Alright, now try this again, and check it out. So this is what we have right now. The player 58 scored 26 goals in 30 games, so he had an average of 0.87 goals per game. The player 66, he looks like the best because he scored 39 goals in 30 games, 1.3 points per game. This guy down here, 87, is pretty good too. He scored 31 goals, not anywhere near the most, but it only took him 26 games to do it, so that's why his stats are so high. So we could actually just finish this right now and say, okay, find the one with the highest points per game. It's 66, easy enough. However, the problem with this is whenever you're doing this for an entire league, whether it's a soccer, a football league, or a hockey league, looking through all that data can be kind of painstaking. So what I like to do is add a really simple condition right here that just at the end, it just tells you who the best player is. And this is actually really easy to do. So of course, we get the best player based on their points per game. So we'll say that if points per game for whatever player you're currently looping through is greater than the best points per game, and again, this is going to say, okay, the first time, we'll say that the first player is the best, since by default it's 0. And then every other time, so right now on the first loop, 58 is the best. On the second loop, it's going to say 66 is the best. And he's going to remain the best as long as no one beats him out. So as long as no player is better than the current player with a high score, I guess you could call, And the logic that we use to do that is this. Should probably type this out before I start talking. And the best player, which you stored right there, is equal to player I. Where you at? Player I. And I'll actually just finish this program real quick, and then I'll explain to you guys what this last line does. So printf, and I'll kick this to a new line too, and put the best player is %d, new line. And of course, we're going to store the best player in this, and let me print it out, and then I'll talk you guys through it. So right now, it pretty much not only calculated the player's points per game, which is awesome, but it also automatically just gave us the best player at the end. So we don't have to, look through 500 pieces of data manually. Now we already know what this for loop does right here. I just explained it. But the reason that we get the best player at the end is because it always stores the guy with the highest score until it gets overridden. So this is the player you're looping through, and this condition is only going to be true if they're better than the current best points per game player. So if they are, then we say, okay, the best points per game is now this points per game, which would mean that the best player is that player. Again, both I, which in this case would be 0, 1. Pretty freaking sweet. So that is how you check for the best player, and he gets stored in this variable until you decide to print him out at the end. So if you guys don't quite understand how fantasy hockey works, then at least you understand how to loop through, and these are called parallel arrays. They're pretty much arrays that you can use in parallel with each other. For example, every player has goals, games played, and points per game. And well, whenever you're making something like a spreadsheet or something like that, you're going to use these a lot. So well, that's actually all I have for you for now. I don't want to blow your brain up. So I'm going to go cheat at fantasy hockey a little more. If you wanted to, I welcome you. If you want to add some more columns, then add them, post them on my forum so I can check them out. I'd love to see them. But for now, thank you guys for watching, and I'll smile you later.